Hello and welcome everybody to the Beacon of Light podcast this evening. Tonight we are with Monika Polefka-Proulx. And with her, we are going to jump into something really, really important and very timely. But before we talk to her, let's jump into this.
I'm April Tribe Juke. Welcome to the Beacon of Light podcast. I believe we are all made with light, and light is hope. This podcast brings authors who write stories of hope to all of you. Your journey to be inspired and amplified by these stories starts now.
And we're back. Thank you everybody for coming here this evening. And today, it's been really exciting to kind of make plans to have, when authors will be put down on the schedule, and the timeliness of Monika's message is really, really important. And so we're going to dive in deep right now. You can see that running underneath on the ticker, her book is called No Matter What. How far would you go to save your child? And before we jump into that part of the book, we're going to do some background and kind of fill in this part so we can understand why she wrote this book. So, Monika, we talked a little bit off screen here, and I would love to tell you, or love to ask you, what happened? Why did all of this even get started? Share a little bit about the background of how, unfortunately, this whole thing about bullying began.
Well, my daughter was just like any other little girl. She was very average in every way until she started school. And when she began school, we discovered very quickly that she had some cognitive learning difficulties. So she wasn't learning as quickly as some of the other students. And in kindergarten, that wasn't really a big issue. But when she hit grade 1, it became quite apparent that she was struggling. And so at that young age, she started being bullied. But she was not bullied just from her peers. She was actually being bullied by some of the educators. Her main educator, her classroom teacher, really targeted her and made it so that the other students targeted her as well. From there, we fought really long and hard to get her tested, find out where her learning difficulties came. And this teacher fought us on it in every way. From that point on, a few years later, we decided to move out of the community because it was a very tiny community. And I just felt that she wasn't getting the education or the help that she needed to thrive. So we moved to a larger community, which had better skills for dealing with children with learning difficulties. And so we moved into this community. And at the beginning, it was really good for about a year or two. But when she hit grade 3, the bullying intensified. And there was a group of children that actually created a little gang. They were little girls. But their goal was to recruit other students to follow Samantha, my daughter, home and beat her up. And they actually said that they wanted to kill her. So we went to the school, we talked to them about it. They didn't take us very seriously because, for obvious reasons, I mean, who's going to think that grade 3 students are plotting to hurt another student to such a degree? So from then on, we tried harder and harder to get support from educators, and we put her into counseling. She was really traumatized by the idea that these girls wanted to hurt her. And things seemed to settle down a little bit, although there was always some bullying going on in the background. She didn't fit in quite the way some girls fit in. And I mean, it's very easy, especially with little girls or females, women even, that when there's 3 of them, they tend to kind of gang up on the third. It just sometimes happens. And she was always the one left out, the one that was being ganged up on. As she got a little bit older and went into junior high, social media came into the world, and she was, I didn't realize how dangerous it was at the time, and so she was spending time on Facebook and with her friends, and she was, by that point she had become quite secretive and wasn't letting me know what was really happening with her. So I was really having to monitor what she was doing and really pay attention to who she was hanging out with. But she was very secretive. And so unfortunately, I didn't realize things as quickly as I should have. I knew that she was still being bullied. I just didn't realize how severe it had gotten until it came to head. And I started monitoring her social media and her phone and realized that the bullying was occurring 24 hours a day. She was going to school and being bullied. She was being bullied by text message, by phone calls. She was being bullied on social media. She was not getting any rest from it or any peace from it. And there was a gang mentality. So as one bully started, they kind of plummeted and became more and more and more. And so she withdrew and became very depressed, very started self-harming, and started associating with people, other kids who were not part of the mainstream. So troubled children. And before I knew it, what had happened, although, there had been signs, small signs along the way, but before I knew how serious it was, she was completely immersed with these group of children who were very, very troubled. Some of them were drug dealers, some of them were criminals, some of them were their goals were to get more and more young girls involved, and it became very dangerous. She started running away and acting out, and by that time she was 15, so I discovered very quickly that there wasn't a lot of support. Now, I know it sounds like I maybe was naive and didn't know what was happening. When I say I didn't know how bad it was, it doesn't mean I wasn't involved. I was at that school all the time. I was saying, look, I was showing them, the school officials, text messages. I went to the police several times and printed out Facebook posts that were telling her to kill herself, that she was worthless. And nobody would help us. Nobody took it seriously. And so she plummeted into a state of severe anxiety and depression. By that time, she was 15 years old. And when I tried to get her the help she needed, I was told that I couldn't force her, because at 14, had I tried at 14 harder to force her into therapy, perhaps we could have done something. But at 15, they said no, she could run away, she could do whatever, and we couldn't do anything. Now, when she became involved with a young man who was planning to traffic her, he convinced her that he was in love with her, although it was very manipulative and very destructive and very aggressive love. But she was broken, and she didn't realize that wasn't love, that he really meant her harm. He was planning to take her out of the province, and we went to police asking them for help, saying, if he takes her, what are we going to do? How do we get her? And they basically told us that she could go and they would not look for her. So bullying is what precipitated all of her downfall, all of her anxiety, all of her depression, and all of her mental health issues, because it totally destroyed her self-esteem and made her feel that was how friends treated each other. That was how boyfriends would treat her. And she really truly felt she was worthless.
Wow, that is very impactful for all of the parents listening to this. I think the fear factor is the lack of help. That's shocking.
It was shocking to us as well. We tried everything we could think of. We went to the school, we went to police, we went to doctors, I went to hospitals, I went to therapists, uh, everything I could think of, family and friends. And basically, all the professionals told us there really wasn't anything they could do for us.
That's just so when you're at that point of such a low level, when you are asking for people that can provide help and they don't, what is it that you started to do, Monica? What was next?
Well, at first I became extremely angry. I was very angry about the situation. I was frustrated. I myself became depressed, but I was determined. I decided that it didn't matter if we couldn't get people to help us, that somehow, some way, we were going to get to her and help her, no matter what it took. And so I started, monitoring her social media. She was running away all the time, and sometimes I wouldn't see her for weeks on end. And I knew that she was in grave danger with the people she was with. And there was, a lot of bullying still going on while this was happening. There, she was getting death threats, and it was a very, very terrible situation. But I decided that no matter what, I would not let her fall through the cracks. So I followed her. I chased her down. I sometimes physically forced her to come home with me. I locked her up sometimes. I got private counseling for her, and forced her physically to go because she would not go. We had sometimes it was brutal. Sometimes I would have to physically pin her down and take her to therapy, and and then knowing full well that I could turn around in any minute, she could be gone again, and there was nothing I could do until I got a hold of her again. I should have been very afraid of the individuals she was with, because I know that they meant us great harm. They were very angry that we would not let her go. But I wasn't. I was just full of rage towards them. And so I decided that it didn't matter if they decided to hurt us, that it wouldn't matter as long as I could save her.
That's very brave. That's something that when when you're faced with all of the things that are happening, the TV programs, the things you see, the movies, when they happen within your own life, and you're like, is somebody going to say cut? Can we finish this? Oh no, this is real.
Mm-hmm.
It brings it into a level where people listening to the stories go, wait, what? Oh,
Right.
you're not talking about a TV. This is your life? And you're like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It did feel a lot like I was living a nightmare, or that honestly, like it was a movie. And, there were often times where I would think, this cannot be real. This cannot be happening. But it was our everyday existence. And, when I would get her back, sometimes she would be so thin and so sick, because while she was gone, she was drinking and doing drugs every minute of the time she was gone, and they weren't eating, and they weren't looking after her. She wasn't looking after herself, and she was in a desperate place. And when it's obviously, when you're right, when you're living it, you can't even fathom that this is truly what's going on in your life, and nobody seems to understand, because it feels so out there that you think it can't really be, this doesn't really happen, right?
Right. Looks like we have Samantha here. She says, hi, Mom.
That's my little girl. Yes, fortunately she's doing really well now.
So, the fight to save someone, no matter how far you go to really help them at the time, at the minute, at everything that is happening, there's something in the future that we can't see, but
Hmm.
we know that if we don't fight for her, who will? And you already asked all these professionals, teachers, school places, counselors, police. Nobody else would. It was
Nobody else would.
you.
And honestly, if we wouldn't have, I knew that we ran the risk. No, I knew we would never see her again. If she left, we would never see her again. I feared that she would be dead on the side of a road somewhere, and I was just not going to give up that fight without having done everything I possibly could to make sure that did not happen.
So all of this going on, and it comes kind of to some type of end. And
Hmm.
we won't have to discuss all of that, but somewhere you started to feel, I need to write about this. So now
Right,
it's time to talk about the book.
right.
Your book is called No Matter What, How Far Would You Go to Save Your Child? Tell us a little bit about how the process of writing and why you wanted to do that.
Mm. Well, I've always wanted to write a book. And this, after things had settled down and Sam was home and safe, and we were headed on an upward path of recovery, I kept thinking that I should write a book, or I should do something to help other parents, maybe start a support group, something. But I didn't know where to begin. And I wasn't sure how Sam would feel about us talking about me discussing her life in front of so many people. So I kept that in the back of my mind for several years. And then the opportunity came up, and I was actually working on a novel. And I started the novel, and then I decided this just was this little push in the back of my brain that kept saying, really, this is what you want to do. You want to help other parents, you want to help other teens. Write this book. So I talked to Sam, and she agreed that she was wanted me to write it and share it. So I started the process. It took me about 2 years because it was a very long, painful, traumatic experience, reliving it, but it was also very cathartic and healing. And once it was done, I just couldn't wait to get it out there for other parents who, I know other parents are feeling alone. I know
Right.
they are because I was there. So I just was thrilled to get it out. And I was thrilled that my daughter was such an integral part of it, of telling our family's story and her story.
In the telling of the story, how many people listened or wanted to know more, or what happened with them?
With the people who wanted to know more.
Yes.
Okay, so I've created a program, a coaching program, and I work with families of teens and young adults who struggle with anxiety, depression, self-harming, or are just acting out, or full of rage or anger or running away. There are so many things that affect our teens nowadays, and so many ways that as parents we feel we're ill-equipped to help them. And while I always encourage everybody to get therapy, there's also the coaching program, which is geared towards helping parents and teens look inly at themselves and how they can heal, and what steps they need to take to increase communication and decrease the stress that's happening in the home. So my program is called the Unreachable Reach program, and it's made up of 5 modules, which is the root module, the eyes wide open module. As parents, we have to be willing to openly look at ourselves and look at what's our teens going through, and look at whether they're getting into trouble, why that's happening, or whether they're withdrawing, and all the different ways. So there, and then there's attack, so attacking negative influences, and chasing with love in any way that we can to reach them, and then finally repairing the hurt. So and that's I've been fortunate enough to work with some really lovely families who have found my program to be helpful to them and open a little bit of the closed doors that occur when things go wrong.
Yes. The idea of reaching out, I think our hearts are always within that reach. It's the how. What do I do? What if I offend or pull too hard, or how do I
Hmm.
break this, or, break the trust again, or there's so many. All I know is that action starts, and it usually goes in a good way because your heart is really connected to their heart. They're your child.
Right, right.
And
And I always say that, as parents, we're really the ones who know them better than anybody else. So teachers and friends and everybody has their opinion of who our child is, but instinctually we know who our children are. We know what they need. We just have to dig deep into ourselves to reconnect with that.
right. And that reconnection, I think, also has timing with that. Um, the families that experience this, there is a timing that I think, with just naturally with maturity, helps, right?
Mhm.
Got that troubled teen range, that 14 to 17-year-old. Just, if I can get through those years,
Right.
well, the challenges there, whatever the scale, and your scale is extreme, but we have to build the relationships with them and to know that no matter what, there is a place, there is love. Now, of course, you can have love with boundaries, but there
Mhm.
has to be a safe space for them to come back. So I'd be
Right.
interested to know, as you chased after your daughter and physically took her to these places and therapies, now with her perspective on things, what does she say about that?
Um Well, she's she's very grateful that we did, and there was a lot of things that she did and said she didn't even know she was doing. She just was so broken that and so damaged by everything that had happened to her that she was acting on instinct, and so the whole process was actually a learning process for me as well. I had to learn to recommunicate with her in ways that worked, and to hold back sometimes and push forward other times, regardless of how difficult it seemed. So um, she knows that without that, she would not have been where she is today, and she did the hard work herself. I mean, we fought for her and made that happen, but she had to make that choice to fight for herself. It was just to get her to see that was the hard part.
Yes, it usually is the hardest part. And so in your book, you share the story, the ins and outs, I'm sure, kind of in a short timeline of how things progressed and then the chasing after. So as you've got your subtitle here that
Mhm.
says, how far will you go to save your child? As you're writing this, is there a particular chapter that really stands out to you that speaks to that subtitle?
Yeah, there there is a chapter where I was feeling very desperate, and I thought we had done everything we could, and there was no one who was willing to help us. And I was terrified that he was going to take her out of the province, especially after finding out from the police that they were not going to continue to search for her if she went, and that basically she would be beyond our reach and anything could happen to her. So I became quite desperate, and started considering some very dangerous solutions that and criminal solutions that I really had to struggle with to decide whether I was willing to go that far to protect her. Fortunately, we didn't have to go that route. But even to this day, I'm not 100% sure that I wouldn't have.
Wow. And I think that's that, best description, which is the mama bear. There's just a point where you've focused, where you've done all that you can, and you're going to continue to figure out how to help. And so I'm really glad that Samantha jumped on here, and she says again, "Hi, mom." It's wonderful that she has the support, that you wrote the book together, in the sense of together with permission for her. Like, she was
Mhm.
like, share the story and trusting you. I mean, that to me says a huge thing about your relationship. To trust you to write about this for the world to read, and she's satisfied and fine with that. That's big, mom. That's a big part
It's
of that.
huge. It's huge. I but she read it as I was writing it, though, and I gave it to her. She read it several times, and there were many times where I was more afraid. I would kept saying, "Well, how do you feel about this?" Even a month before the book was coming out, I was asking her, "If you don't want me to do this, I can pull the plug right now." And she said, "No, it's good. I'm proud. I'm happy that we've agreed to do this." So we're
That's
very close. She's my angel.
I can see that. "I love you so much, mama," she says. I think that's wonderful. Thank you, Samantha, for not quitting on your mom, not quitting on your family, not quitting. And that's part of, unfortunately, there comes that line, and only those who come up to it and then cross over it know where it is. And when
Mhm.
the line is crossed and all hope is gone, we can end with awful tragedies, with horrible circumstances for future or no future. And
Mhm.
the impact, stories like this impact whole communities. We might think, oh, that's their challenge with the bullying. If anything happened, if Samantha was upset enough, if the man was upset enough, if all of a sudden the community
Exactly.
would have been like what happened down in
Exactly.
Texas.
Exactly.
So, as this part of the society and community, we need to reach, connect more, and not be so isolated. We've got to connect. Samantha says,
Right.
"Didn't give up on me, so I didn't give up on her," when she was writing this book. Oh, mama, that touches hearts right there.
I mean, if you think about it, she turned her despair inward. So she became angry with herself and lashed out. But only to her parents and her family. She could have turned that anger outwards and lashed out in the community and done, unspeakable things. So
Yeah, the
it
revenge, the gang that was trying to bully her, I'm sure she remembers, knows that. I mean, it could have happened to
mhm,
anyone. If you have a thought long enough, and an anger or some kind of drive on that, and if you can't let it go, there's could be awful things.
mhm,
So, just as something we want to take as caution, please watch. Parents, please be involved. This is the cost,
mhm.
what it means to parent. And the absent parent is no more. We must connect together, and community connecting together, and
Yeah.
watching out for one another. As a teacher, I watch, I listen, I learn about many things from my students, and I'll share things with their parents that they've shared with me and we didn't know, and
Mhm.
more conversations. And as a bridge and a go between, I feel that responsibility as part of the social and the community part to support, because we all need that in our lives. So, Monica, I think you
It's
are,
so valuable.
yeah, I think you're tough as nails to know that even after all these no's, you didn't quit, and you turned it into a project that now helps so many parents. So, with our last few minutes here, Monica, what would you like to share with the world tonight?
Um, Basically, I just want parents to know that they're not alone, that and unfortunately, this is more and more common. We have to be more diligent than we've ever been before. You said it perfectly when you said that families and community needs to connect, we have to fight the negative influences by doing that, because now it's not just something isolated that occurs in a school setting. Now it's everywhere. Our children are being influenced everywhere they go, and they're being bombarded. So we have to be really, really aware of what they're doing, where they're going, and what their influences are, who they're connecting with. And the only way we can do that is as a community, watching
Correct.
out for each other.
I believe that's very true. And that is that old idea of the beacon of light. As that lighthouse, it's not there to serve itself, it's there to reach out and to help others. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. Thank you, Samantha, for joining us and sharing your insight there. Thank you, Monica. Parents, get out there, grab this book. It is on Amazon. We will share the link below. And tomorrow we will have the blog, and she'll share more of her story about that tomorrow. So we'll send that out to everybody. Please make sure to read that, like, heart, share, subscribe, and let's bring out this beacon to all. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.